to introduce our Emerging Leader Salon panel, and as I start calling names, please come on up. Rahsaan Harris is going to be our moderator, President and CEO of the Emma Bowen Foundation. Richard Brown, Vice President of American Express Philanthropy and one of our esteemed board members. Flozell Daniels Jr., President and CEO of the Foundation for Louisiana. Linetta Gilbert, Managing Partner at Gilbert and Associates and Chairman, Board of Trustees for the Foundation for Louisiana. And Claire Peeps, Executive Director of the Durfee Foundation. In your program book, Sharice West was also planning to be up here, but she could not make it. So we have our wonderful panelists here who will carry the torch. Quickly, before they get started, we'll have 2 breakouts when this session ends, and I'll come back up here to remind you, and we'll have the room set up, but just keep in mind as you listen to the words of wisdom from these folks, who you may want to hear from directly, more intimately, and you'll be able to listen to 2. So I will let Rahsaan take it away.
Awesome. Good morning.
Morning.
All right, so housekeeping. Emily, when do we need to cut?
Giving you 45 minutes.
45 minutes, so 9 minutes for each of us in general, just to let you know. So my name's Rahsaan Harris, Dr. Rahsaan Harris.
Yeah, that's right.
I am the,
Claim
thank you very much.
Claim it.
I'll wrap that into a story that I'm going to tell pretty soon. The Emerging Leader Salon is a forum for us to have real talk. Does anyone watch Larry Wilmore, The Nightly Show? So Larry Wilmore has a segment where it's called Keep It 100. And he asks a question, and he lets the audience decide if the person kept it 100, and if they do, they get a sticker. And if they don't, they get a tea bag. So this is the Keep It 100 panel. This is the Keep It 100 space. So feel free, if someone gives an answer that you think is just being completely politic and diplomatic, you could, yeah, well, sure, they're taping it. You can give an imaginary tea bag to them, or just frown and go like this, and they'll get the point and do what they're really supposed to do. But before I get started, I really want to thank you for showing up. EPIP conference is not the conference that many bosses send you to. It's the conference that you have to advocate for yourself to get to. So you coming out to New Orleans, being down here, shows the courage that you showed in believing in yourself and believing in this community that you're part of. And I just want to thank you for that. And that courage is actually mirrors the courage that Rusty Stahl had when he was sitting at the Council on Foundations with his other colleagues and recognized the room didn't reflect who he was and the vision he had for philanthropy. So we are standing on the shoulders of the legacy that he left for us. I really encourage you to be courageous, and as you ask questions and talk to these very distinguished people, ask them about their moments where they had to stand in courage to be able to make the change in the world that they really wanted to make. I also want to give a really quick shout out. I could not love Emily and Michael more, my people. Ileana, Kristen Lee, Melvin and Ja, Sachi, Tamir, Sophia, Carly with the work in JAG. EPIP is a lot bigger than it looks on paper because of the love and the dedication that those people show and that you show as volunteers. EPIP is strong, and it's going to continue to be strong just as long as you continue to believe in this community. So thank you all for your commitment and everything that you've done. So what are we going to do up here? I'm going to try not to cry because those poems killed me. That's the first thing. But we're really going to try to keep it 100. The Twitter policy, I'm going to explain it. This room is kind of the more open Twitter space to a certain extent. I'm going to ask each panelist before they give their comments, would they like to be tweeted or not? As we go into the private sessions, that is absolutely no Twitter zone so that you can get the 100% unvarnished no matter what version. Because this is supposed to be a chance for you to figure out what being a leader looks like in a leadership journey. So the questions that I'm going to ask are, can you be tweeted? Who are you? Talk to me about a failure that you've had, and what would be your walk-in music? You know, if they're making a movie about you and you're coming in the first scene, what would be the walk-in music? It doesn't have to be your life walk-in music, but like the way you feel right now. And ultimately, all of those questions lead up to what we're really trying to do is we're competing for you as audience. So you get to choose who you get to see afterwards. So therefore, we want to make sure that you think we're the best. So no pressure for the panelists. And I'd like to model. So I'm Rahsaan Harris, PhD. I'm the CEO of the Emma Bowen Foundation. What we do is we create a diverse pipeline for media companies so that we can make media look more like America. My Twitter policy is you can tweet me, I don't care. Build a brand, that's what I want to do. In general, who am I authentically? I am a bougie, middle-class black kid from central New Jersey, born to two parents that got divorced, after I was well-formed and graduated college. Had a chance to grow up in a very diverse ethnically community that informed kind of who I am, but was also raised in a black church that allowed me to feel confident in my black maleness and kind of validated me when my multicultural community sometimes did or didn't. And if you come to my session, I can tell you some stories about what that looked like when it didn't. Bio major, went to the Peace Corps, was going to be a doctor, decided I wanted to get into community, people love them stuff. When I started doing I Love People, worked a nonprofit, my landlord for the nonprofit I was running called me and told me that there was a position open at the Atlantic Philanthropies and that I should apply for it because she liked me. And that was like a business holding of Chuck Feeney's, who was the founder of Atlantic Philanthropies, and that's how I got my almost 8-year career at Atlantic. So that's a little bit about me. My failure actually was when I was at Atlantic. I had a wonderful educational benefit. They paid for 75% of my education, so I figured I'd just get a PhD in my spare time. They had a part-time program at NYU. I was just going to do that, and I did. And I went to NYU for 3 years and passed all my classes and did a great job. And when it got to my comprehensive exams, they would not pass me. So I spent all of Atlantic's money, and at 25%, that was my money, and had spent all that time outside of work trying to get my PhD, and these folks tried to tell me that I was not PhD material. I'm a black man with a degree at that point from Princeton University, a degree from Columbia University for my master's, and NYU would not give me a PhD. And actually, one of my advisors said, there are some places that will give you an online PhD that recognize your experience. Why don't you look into that, Rahsaan? So picked myself up. I think it was like Sarah Bareilles had I'm Not Gonna Write You a Love Song, that song. I'm not gonna write you a love song. So like I was not gonna write those comprehensive exams the way they wanted to because they didn't see who I really was and what my contribution was going to be. Fast forward, got into the new school where I should have been in the first place, got a national dissertation fellowship that gave me $25,000 to write my dissertation, along with 4 other people around the country, and sailed through and got my PhD and did my dissertation on black philanthropy. And the victory was an alumni person from NYU shot me an email. Rahsaan, I just saw that you became the CEO of the Emma Bowen Foundation. We'd like to profile you in our alumni magazine. So if you want to hear how that story ended, also come to my session. And then the last thing I want to say besides my failure is my walk-in song music and that is Time of Our Lives by Pitbull and Neo, because for some reason, every time when I walked into the dry cleaner, the woman said that it was always on. It was a party song for me. So if you don't know what it's like. But I got just enough to get up in this club, have me a good time. Wait for it. My time is up. Hey, let's get it now. I want the time of my life. Well, you get the point. So I wanted to model that for the rest of the panel. First question, are you tweetable? We'll just go down the line. Who are you? Failure and walk-in music.
All right. Geez, tweetable. I work for a corporation, so.
So his answer is no. I'll say it for you.
No, you can tweet me. I'm not going to say anything that controversial. So, Richard Brown. I work at American Express. Been there about 7 years. I've had a somewhat similar background, actually, to Rahsaan. I grew up in Westchester County in a pretty integrated community. I have 3 brothers, 2 parents who are married for over 50 years. My father unfortunately passed 2 years ago. And my mother still lives in the house we grew up in. And so it was a pretty stable situation. My 3 brothers, we all finished school. Our parents told us that if we finished in 4 years, they'd paid for it. And so that was taken care of, which is a very unique, I think, situation, and one that I'm very privileged every day, because I know that the educational background that I have has been the foundation of any success that I've had, and I attribute that to my parents. My father, to this day, is my hero, somebody who I think a lot alike, and somebody who was very a nurturing person. He wasn't somebody who would say, I love you very often. I had to pull that out of him, but I knew he did, but I wanted to hear it, so I was very specific in asking for that. My mother and the relationship I have with her has been a little bit more rocky, unfortunately. But she's somebody I think who loves me, but we have disagreed and have had some challenges over the years. But at the end of the day, my childhood was a fabulous childhood. I have no complaints. I wish that my kids could have the childhood that I have, or that I had. I'm a product of Syracuse University. Graduated some time ago, and I've been in corporate philanthropy since probably, I guess it was 1988 that I started in corporate philanthropy. I started at Philip Morris in New York. I've been in that role for 9 years. I then went to work for Texaco, and then I worked for Toys R Us, and then I worked for AT&T Wireless, and then I worked for Goldman Sachs. And now I work for American Express. So there's a hodgepodge of organizations that I've worked for over the years. All very different companies, some really feel-good companies where you tell people and they want to get money from you, and then others, not so much. But it's been a really challenging time to work in corporations that are not necessarily loved. So my time at Philip Morris was a little bit of a challenge, given that there was on one particular occasion when we worked in the anti-hunger arena pretty extensively because of our connection and we own Kraft General Foods, and so we did a lot in anti-hunger. And so we was a group in the Bronx that we gave a grant to, and they essentially sent it back to us because the board was against receiving tobacco money. So that was a little jarring. It's like the worst thing that can happen to a grant maker, that somebody returns their check. So that was a situation that we, at that point, would actually ask the organizations that we were funding to poll their boards to make sure that taking the money would be okay. Texaco was not as bad, I would say, but Toys R Us was fabulous. Everybody wanted us to be, Toys R Us was, people always wanted to partner with us. And so I've had a good run. I've had a great run, actually, in corporate philanthropy. I'm having a fabulous time now at American Express. This has been really a wonderful opportunity for me. I've had some ups and downs in terms of the folks that I've worked for, and if you want to hear more about some of the challenges I've had, come to my salon. In terms of failures, I can tick off my first marriage, perhaps, as this first, certainly. That was a failure. It lasted 9 months. I knew that I probably shouldn't have done it when I was in the Buddhist temple getting married to this woman. And we were singing, doing the chants. So that was probably an indicator. We had a great honeymoon in Morocco, but that was probably the end of it. The honeymoon didn't even last through the honeymoon, actually, which is kind of sad. I would say that my walk-in music would be Alicia Keys' New York, New York. That's my song. I was looking for it. I don't have it, but that's my song. And was there anything else?
No, you perfect. Empire State of Mind.
Yeah. Rahsaan is in charge about everyone's soundtrack.
Anyway.
So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Good morning, and this is really an honor. I should say that one of my favorite songs that makes me think of this conference in New Orleans is from Lettucey that says, "I've been waiting for you." So it's been since the very beginning of EPIP that as a grant maker at the time, I really wanted to see EPIP working in the American South. So you're here, and congratulations. I'm Linetta Gilbert. I am a native of Rochester, New York. I was born there just a few years ago. I am the last daughter of Joseph Jones and Aline Massey Jones, both of whom were hardworking Americans who saw the world in terms of opportunity coming through education. My dad completed high school. My mom dropped out at the 8th grade when she had to take on responsibility for helping to raise her siblings when her mom died, and they lived in Tennessee. Both of my parents were absolutely certain that we would all finish with a higher education degree. We all did. We all took different paths. We all became professionals. Unfortunately, my dad was not able to witness it all. He died when I was 7 years old. He died just after the OSHA standards came into being. And he worked at a utility company as a maintenance man, and he fell 15 feet from a scaffold because he wasn't connected, shackled to the place where he was working. My mom was literally a fighter. Her fight started when she married early to a man that my grandfather did not approve of, and my grandfather disowned her, and the man was abusive. And that started her trajectory to run from St. Louis with two of my older sisters to save money until she could buy a train ticket for all of them, the three of them. And when she got on the train, the conductor said, "Where are you getting off?" And she said, "Wherever the train stopped." So she stopped in Rochester and met my dad. So we know about fighting to make life better. My mother was always a protector. In fact, we used to say my dad would make the friendships, my mother would break them up. But she was very clear that family was very important to her and that the family should succeed. So we had several incidences with my mom which are memorable, and that shaped who we are. I would say to you that I didn't understand how important parent involvement was until my mother showed me by showing up everywhere we were to be involved. Now, part of that was because she was trying to be a good parent. Part of it was that because she never got to be a child. Mm-hmm. So at one point I can remember saying, if we're going to the circus, I can't, please, no more. Because, we went to everything. I mean, the zoo, the circus, the parades, we had barbecues at our house, but it was a way of taking care of us and knowing who our friends were. And again, she got to do things she didn't get to do at our age. I moved to New Orleans in the early 80s, right after the Reagan election. I moved from Washington, D.C. I'm a graduate of Howard University. I met my husband there. We married at Howard University at midnight in the chapel. We have two daughters who are young women. Ashley Gardier, who works here for the city of New Orleans and is doing a fabulous job as a wife and a mother and a public servant. And I have two grandsons. And I have a daughter, Dr. Marita Gilbert, who is a professor at Allegheny College and is in creating their gender studies program. I think I am who I am because I believe in what I can do for others and for myself. I've spent most of my life working to understand life in America because I am a Black American. I will never surrender that American title. And I am determined that this country's going to work for me and people like me. So my work has been, when I joined Philanthropy in 1990, I started at the Greater New Orleans Foundation, and I worked there for 10 and a half years, from being a program officer to being vice president for programs. And don't fool yourself, when I was vice president for programs, I still had no staff. But we did a lot during that time. We were able to always showcase the wisdom and capacity of New Orleans people to the world, because most people really felt this was the party place and that we did nothing serious. So we were able to build up 2 generations of nonprofits who did what you're now calling social justice work. These are groups that knew how to get the issues up and solutions made and then provoke big systems towards change. We hadn't done enough of that by 2005 when the storms came. I was recruited when I left the foundation in December of 1999. I was recruited to work for the Casey Foundation here in New Orleans. I did that for a while. Then I was recruited by the Ford Foundation to come to New York and work, where I worked for another 10 years as a program officer and then a senior program officer for community philanthropy and civic culture. In that role, I had a chance to see the world and see how people live in their communities and use their assets to make life better. I kept thinking about, so what's the song? My song will always be, I'm grateful. Because being in this role, whether I'm a staffer or a member of a board, being in the field of philanthropy has allowed me to understand the world better and to get resources to groups of people who would never have seen the light of day of a philanthropy the size of the Ford Foundation. I love the field because it allows me to accept my humility, hold on to my humility, but to grasp and reach for the pride that's stuck inside of so many people that we try to work with. And so the other song I would sing today as I leave the room is Happy, the Happy Song by Pharrell Williams. Because every time I hear it, whether I'm in a store or in my house, I just start dancing. And my grandsons, when they saw the videos of it, said, when it ended, do it again, Grandma. So it keeps me doing it again. So if you come to my session, you're going to hear a lot more about my experiences. Some of you have read about it in Wit and Wisdom. I don't know if you've seen the book that Mark Constantine did. But I'm just encouraging you to go to any of the sessions that you want to. You're going to learn something from all of us.
And before I go to Flozell, I'd be remiss to tell you the story if I didn't tell you. So when I took over for Rusty, I go into the office and I see this wonderful Apple computer that's on the desk. And I tap it to log in, and there's this huge screensaver of this picture of Miss Gilbert on the screen. And Rusty, I guess, isn't so subtle, but he just didn't want me to forget where all this came from. He wanted us to know that, you know, the grants that Linetta made to EPIP early on are what launched EPIP. So all this right here would not be happening if it weren't for her leadership and her courage and belief in Rusty's courage to get this going. So.
So, good morning, everyone. I can be tweeted.
Oh, yeah, I can be too.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I can be tweeted. She said, hell yeah. And I am still full from Kelly and this conversation, and so Linetta said, but now don't you cry in here. But that's a sign of strength in the way I think and see about it. And so I appreciate being here. I am the grandson of Sadie Mae Nicholson Hathorn, who was a woman in Needingham, Alabama, who decided to leave an abusive husband who himself was sick, alcoholism, had come back from the war, couldn't get work, and had the temerity to move her family to New Orleans and create a new life. I am the son of Betty Singleton, who was 16 when she had me and was told, that's not gonna work. You shouldn't do that, right? And had options, and she chose me. And my father's a delightful man who lives in Mississippi, and he is my namesake, I guess, how that goes, Flozell Jr. There are a few of us in the world. And I'm the product of a bunch of women who sat on porches and men who sat on milk crates, not necessarily drinking milk, by the way. In an uptown neighborhood where we looked out for each other, where there was family and community. I am the product of teachers who actually saw me as a scholar when no one else did, and who believed in me. And I am a graduate of the University of New Orleans with a BA in Biological Sciences. I actually did research for the USDA for a number of years. Got involved in civic work, eventually was offered a job in the mayor's office when Mark Morial, now the national president of the Urban League, was mayor of this amazing, magical city. And that is where I think I first cut my teeth in public policy, learning how to manage staff, how to manage difficult circumstances. I was speaking with someone yesterday, learning about the ins and outs of intersectoral politics and what happens across lines and how to get people to consensus. I did that work for about 3.5 years before I had an opportunity to work at Tulane University. I think it's still the largest employer in the city, one of the largest in the state. Both an amazing place and also a university that had only decided to let black people attend a few years, really within our lifetime, if you think about it, about 50 years ago. So it was an interesting opportunity for me. I once lived 6 blocks from Tulane and was often told by my neighborhood family, you can't go over there. They don't want you over there. So as it turns out, they did. And, and they needed me over there. So I went and spent nearly 10 years there, first as the assistant director of state government affairs, and was promoted about 6 times, actually, over a 9.5-year period. And it was a space where I got to build out my professional sort of skills. I left there as executive director and assistant vice president for state and local affairs, having built out statewide strategies to affect public policy around everything from genetics research to help with juvenile cancer issues to mass incarceration reduction, expanding assets and what have you through some of our IDA collaborative work. It was an amazing experience. And finally, I was then selected as the president and CEO of what was then the Louisiana Disaster Recovery Foundation, now the Foundation for Louisiana. And this is important because along my career, I have had people who decided I was the right person. Like, you get chosen, as it turns out. And you get chosen and you get the opportunity to prove that the people who sent you won't be embarrassed. That the people who sent you, the people who made you, will see in your work what they hope manifest in good for the community. And so from the people who raised me as a child, through my mentors and coaches in my professional career, and then to get a chance, this lady to my left not only chaired the search committee, but is now the chairperson of my board. And as you can tell, what an amazing opportunity. I won't embarrass her too much, but there is something about intentionality when my predecessor, the amazing Dr. Sharice West Scantleberry, phenomenal Sharice, left for a better opportunity. They said, we're gonna find someone local. We're gonna find someone who has our values. We're gonna find someone who's gonna stick with this work. And they made the investment, even though I wasn't always necessarily ready for everything that I was to face. My failure. Ooh, so what happens when your board chair is sitting next to you? I'll quickly tell this part of the story. I came in, and one of the things the board said to me is, well, you know, we need a strategic planning process. We really need to sketch out the next few years and what this work looks like. We were at a stage in the recovery where things were still very intense. And I decided I'm in charge. I'm president and CEO, and I'm going to go and hire someone, a firm, and we're going to do a strategic plan, and I'm going to tell my staff what to do, and we're going to do it that way because I'm in charge. Let me tell you, when I was in grad school, I have an MBA in Management and Leadership Studies from Tulane. And I was taught about soft power. And let me tell you, it ain't so soft, right? And yeah, a total failure. The staff didn't believe in the consultants. I had not built consensus. I didn't have a vision that I was able to translate and build with them, and it just didn't work. And so there is something about translational leadership and the lessons that you learn when you are in the staff seat, if you will, when you're not the CEO or the executive director, that you have to bring with you when you get that opportunity. And the opportunity is coming. It took me a long time to figure that out. It was about a year or so. I still had great leadership on the board and folks who were helping usher me through, but they also gave me the space to learn those lessons. And it's something I've carried through and I think has informed the rest of my work. Because Linetta cheated, I'm going to cheat on the theme music also. I have two. So when I am getting ready for serious work, or when I am even going to a funeral, or like there's certain times when I need to get grounded, Mahalia Jackson's version of How I Got Over, right? Mm-hmm. You know, my soul looks back and wonder, how did I make it over? Grounds me, and it's my space, and I have it right here. I dial it up. When I'm in the bathroom or when I'm getting ready, it's my, you know, you have no clue. And then my other more ratchet version. They said this was a safe space.
Yes, indeed.
You guys have no clue some of the stuff.
It wasn't guaranteed to be ratchet free.
It is, well,
That's right.
you know, and so the clips, if you guys are hip hop fans, so I'm 44, so I grew up on all kinds of, the Clips has this song called I'm Good with Pharrell Williams, right? And it is just pure braggadocio. It is, I'm fine, I'm well dressed, my car is better than yours, my music is loud, and I'm riding through the hood and I'm good, right? Yeah, that's my other, and I would actually come in on that, you know.
You do come in on it. By the way, that's my failure.
Okay, the unenviable position of being the last after this morning. So who am I? I'm Claire Peeps. I'm the director of the Durfee Foundation, which is a small family foundation in Los Angeles. I grew up in Minnesota. I was the child of immigrant parents. My parents came after World War II from England. And this is an interesting exercise for me because one of the things about being British is you don't talk about yourself and you don't talk about your past. My mom passed at age 2 weeks shy of her 95th birthday last month. And we've been saying that the gift of her extended life in the past couple of years is she finally shared stories with us that she'd never told us when we were growing up. My parents went to war when they were 17. When the war was over, they were 25. Imagine spending that period of your life in war. My dad was in Egypt and India as part of the Indian Army, actually. My mom is a 3 times decorated war hero. She was a meteorologist. She was recruited because she was good at science, and she was part of the team of meteorologists who delayed D-Day for 2 days because of fog. She left England after the war. My dad didn't want to stay in England because he'd spent 8 formative years of his life all over the world and couldn't imagine going back to a small island country and wanted to move. So he applied for jobs, and he got to go to college after the war. My mom didn't. She never got to become a scientist. She never got to become a doctor, which is what she wanted to do. She instead had children. She had my daughter, and my dad got an architectural degree and applied for for professorships, and wanted to go to India. So he applied in Bombay, and he applied in British Columbia. So fate might have had it that I grew up in India. But he landed a job in Vancouver, and when my sister was 4.5 years old and my brother was 10 days old, they got on a ship and they sailed across the ocean. My mom was seasick the whole way. And in those days, nobody breastfed, and there was no formula on the boat, so she had to give cow's milk to her little infant son. So he was very sick the whole way, so everybody was sick. And they got off and got on a train and went across the country to land at their destination of their new home, and discovered they got a telegram that her dad had passed, and she was never able to go back. Never met my grandparents. My one grandfather was a coal miner, and the other ran a brewery that went bust, and he ended up running a small tobacconist shop. I have a key that was on my birthday cake. It was on my daughter's 21st birthday cake from my mom's 21st birthday cake. When she was in World War II, there was in England, when you turn 21, it's a really big deal. And so you get a little ceramic key that is a symbol of your entry to adulthood. And my mom had a party, there was a bomb blast, and everyone ran for the air raid shelter, and the cake was thrown out of her arms and shattered in the street, but somehow that key survived. So that's my connection now to, it was on my daughter's cake last year. It'll be on my niece's cake in a couple of years, and it'll go through the kids that way. Okay, so my parents believed that education was very important, and so they worked really hard to make sure that I went to private schools, which wasn't really necessary in Minnesota. I could have gone to perfectly good public schools. But so I was always the scholarship kid who was faking it in school and all the way through college. My parents never told me to make money. They just told me to do what I loved in life and to try to be good at it. And so I went to college to study political science, thinking that I would become a photojournalist. Loved photography. And it's a detoured, and I ended up becoming an English major and getting a graduate degree in photography. Had an opportunity after graduate school to go work with Ansel Adams when he was still alive, and spent the first couple years of my career working with Ansel. And my life has actually been about following really great mentors and following opportunities to work with amazing people. So that was an extraordinary period because I came from, my graduate degree was all about experimentation, and to go work with the rocks and roots traditionalist was interesting. So I came to Los Angeles not knowing what I was going to do, but wanting to be in a city. Not really feeling comfortable, still hadn't really found my place in the arts world. I've never liked museums or galleries. I've never felt at home there. And worked for an experimental arts magazine that dealt with performance art and politically rooted art. And then fell into another mentorship relationship with an artist, not the dead comedian, but a theater director named Peter Sellers, who did Nixon in China, you might have heard of. Anyway, he's a highly decorated opera director. And he had come to Los Angeles to produce an arts festival. And I was hired to be the curator of the local component of the festival. And the festival was where I discovered actually the intersection between arts and community, and really found the place that was for me the launching pad for everything else that I've done since. We brought a Cambodian dance troupe. It was the first humanitarian exchange with Cambodia that the U.S. had had since since Vietnam. And one of the artists defected in the tour, and several did later on, and joined the Cambodian community in Long Beach that is now the largest, I think, outside of Cambodia. And when the community was established in Long Beach, the first thing they did was not to build affordable housing, and it was not to deal with health or human services. It was to reestablish the dance community. It's where they rekindled their identity and reclaimed their community. And for me, it was beginning to understand that the arts were part of everything else, and that in fact, problem solving in our communities is completely a cross-sector issue and challenge. So now at the Durfee Foundation, we support artists a bit, but most of what we do is problem solving, that we say we are issue agnostic and place-based. We support people working in any sector, and support cross-sector partnerships, believing that those accelerate change. My story of failure goes back to those festival days, and probably really pertinent to this, this conference. We were going to do a festival in 1993 on Africa and the Middle East, and then the Rodney King verdict happened in 1992. And we changed course and focused on communities, Leimert Park, I don't know if the Crenshaw district in Los Angeles, which is an African-American neighborhood. And we worked very closely with Bernice Johnson Regan, who was at the American History Museum at the time and the founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock. And we worked for about 2 years with Bernice to create a beautiful program on the history of gospel in Los Angeles. And I was on the artistic staff. I was not on the development staff or the management staff. And on the night of the big event, which we had put $500,000 into rebuilding the theater, it was a beautiful, beautiful theater and an extraordinary gathering. Unbeknown to any of us on the artistic side, the development staff and the events producers had decided to do a reception following the event for the donors. And they couldn't fit everybody in the tent in the parking lot that they had pitched. Behind the theater, there was a parking lot, and they had put a big tent up. And so there was a relationship we had with one of our donors, ran a restaurant a few blocks away called Doolin's, a soul food restaurant, and it was fantastic. So they sent all of the artists on foot to Doolin's, 3 blocks away, and put all of the donors in the tent behind the theater. And it was one of the worst moments of my life, and it's still it's still the one that like 25 years later wakes me up at night. Bernice was so angry. I don't know if you've ever met Bernice Johnson Regan, but you don't want Bernice Johnson Regan to be angry at you. And I remember trying to explain to Bernice how this had happened, that I didn't know it was the 11th hour, that I wasn't on the development staff. And she just looked at me and said, "You weren't willing to lie down and die for it." And so there you have it. So that's actually the singular worst. I can tell you all kinds of failures, and I'm happy to do so in our session in grant making and giving grants to organizations that were our mission driven and not their mission driven, and and accidentally making 2 grants to the same organization that we weren't supposed to. I'm happy to talk to you about any of that. Right? And dealing with board and community, all that stuff. But that was the singular worst failure in my professional career that I feel like I've spent the rest of my life trying to. It just doesn't. It's just always with me. Okay, so my song, this is a hard one for me. I would have to choose between Janis Joplin, maybe, and because we're in Louisiana, me and Bobby McGee, But actually, I just texted my daughter because actually Louis Armstrong is huge in our family and family history, and we play at all of our events, and a very special connection with my mom, in fact. And so I texted my daughter and said, what song should I have as my walk-in song? And she said, of course, it should be It's a Wonderful World.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great.
Thank
Love
you. So we have about 4 minutes. So I'm going to do this pretty quickly and then give you guys a chance to think of 6 words that you want to leave with the audience before we go to our individual rooms. 6 words. So while you're thinking about your 6 words, I wanted to recap. So Claire talked about following your passion and great mentors. She also discussed, it's kind of extreme, but what are you willing to die for in a professional sense? Flozell talked about soft power. And it's, for me, I kind of translated that into aligning and inspiring, which are the leadership tasks. Linetta, you got the source of wit and wisdom. And spending time with her will give you a sense of what it's to be like with a mother of a movement. With Mr. Brown, Richard, being yourself, your authentic self within corporate philanthropy, and also how does it feel to be rejected when you're trying to do good? How do you incorporate that? What do you do with it? What do you do with a dream deferred? What happens? And then, whatever, you can talk about all the ratchet stuff with me. I guess I'm interested right now, I'm on this track of understanding how do you leverage media to change hearts and minds? And I believe that philanthropy is pittance, it's not a lot of money, but philanthropy that can leverage policy, that's the holy grail, because if you change policy, you move hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars, or if you can leverage culture change, because culture change, changing hearts and minds, can get people to do things differently, like put babies in car seats, or stop smoking, or, see a person and their identity as a transgender person and recognize them and see them. So that's why I'm interested in media. But anyway, 6 words. We will start with Claire.
Okay. Kindness, creativity, honesty, risk, fun, and unanticipated joy.
And that's it. You get only 6 words.
6.
Oh, 2, unanticipated joy was 2, so that didn't count.
It was like hyphenated. We hyphenated.
We hyphenate that one. Yeah, we're gonna be the work, get some nerve.
Oh, good.
Shifting America is your responsibility/opportunity.
For much is given, much is expected.
Mine is emerging never stops. Keep grinding. So I think we gave you 60 seconds, Emily. Boom.